Violence against women online. Given that the way we consume information has changed dramatically over the years, it is important to discuss the phenomenon of violence against women in online spaces, a phenomenon which has only been increasing. As developed and discussed by Luba Kasova in her reports titled The Missing Perspectives of Women in News for the International Women's Media Foundation, consumers of media have several touch points with the news. For our purposes in this section, it is important to understand the relevance of 3 of the 7 touch points. We will look at all 7 touch points later in the course. Outputs, news consumption, and individual impacts are the touch points where we witness the most widespread online violence against women and the effects it has on those who are targeted. And it is primarily, though not exclusively, carried out through social media channels and platforms. Outputs are described in part as the content or news coverage that uses women as story protagonists, including as victims and survivors, and considers how they are portrayed. Women's representation in news media is already considerably lower than men's representation, and when women are visible in news coverage, they are more likely to be portrayed as victims or caretakers than in expert or professional roles. News consumption captures information about how and where women consume news and at what levels. For instance, women consume less news than men, and they consume more of their news via social media platforms than do men. Women's lower consumption of news is in part due to the lack of representation. Individual impacts include such things as the relevance of, interest in, and awareness of news items in relation to gender inequality and gendered issues. For instance, even when gender inequality is being discussed in the news, men are still more likely to be protagonists in that coverage than women. One can imagine how and why that might lead to women seeing the news coverage as irrelevant. It may also point to a lack of awareness on the part of the media outlet. The way that news is framed, or its outputs, affects public opinion and understanding of what is being covered, and in the case of gender-based violence and gendered issues, it has a disproportionate effect on those who are, or are most likely, to be directly impacted by these issues. With women consuming more of their news via social media platforms, they are also more frequently seeing the comments of other users and what those comments say about the subject or object of the news coverage, which intensifies the individual impacts of the news coverage.
At the baseline, I think our staff are actually quite used to angry people, to some level of abuse, and they have training on how to manage it, de-escalate, and extract themselves where necessary. The other thing I think that affects people a lot is when they see actually the personal stuff directed at me. And while I might not get angry, they actually get quite angry. And I do a lot of time to just kind of calm people down and say, don't let it get to you, because when you're letting it get to you, you're letting them win. And this is, I'm not upset by it, so there's no reason for you to be upset by it. I get these emails that are like 10, 12 pages long, just really massive, massive rants. And I just wonder how people have time to do that. And I feel sorry that they feel that this is a good use of their time. There's also this one person who every single day is writing me a lengthy email. And, you'd think it's not going to have an impact if he's not getting a response or seeing any change in my behavior. So that's, kind of extreme in one sense, just in terms of the efforts they're going through. In terms of extreme in how it maybe affected me was on Instagram. I saw a cartoon, and it's kind of this 4-frame cartoon. And so first off, just seeing a cartoon and someone kind of drawing a cartoon of me was kind of a little bit striking. I was not expecting that. And then the sexual overtone to it was very unexpected. My assistant is obviously one of the key people who's filtering out messages. When they come in through different parts of the organization, they basically get filtered up to her as the person who's then going to, flag them for me to look at, or in many cases, she decides she's not going to look at. So she probably actually bears the brunt of seeing most of the personal stuff. She obviously also works very closely to me. We have a very good working relationship. So I think she feels quite loyal to me. So it does affect her a lot to be the one who's reading all of those comments all the time. And I think she also recognizes, how hard I work, how much I'm paying attention to how people in the community may be suffering from COVID infection, as well as some of the economic hardship people are going through. And so I think it really outrages her a bit because she gets to see all of that and feels it's completely off base and doesn't match what she expects. Part of her character is also she is someone who doesn't have a lot of a filter herself. She has a filter when she needs it, but when she's casual, she will just speak her mind and has no problem doing that. And so I think she's also partly affected by it because she really wants to respond and send something and mouth off on these people, because that would be her personal reaction. She, of course, is far too professional to do that, but I suspect that eats away at her, that she can't give these people what she thinks they deserve.
We always need another perspective. In order to make good decisions about who we're going to elect, what we're going to read, what we're going to do, we need to hear from diverse voices. We need to take that information in, and then we need to make our own judgments and our own opinions. But if the pool of people is slowly shrinking because it's dangerous and scary to put your voice out there, then what is that doing to us as a society? And it is a threat to democracy, because that's what democracy is about. We all get to have our opinion. We all get to have a vote. We all get to choose who we want to represent us. We all get to choose what we want to read. It's really important in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusivity to make sure that all of the voices that are out there are heard. How do we create this community that will allow somebody to step forward and put their opinions out there and have a community around them that supports them? So does it mean that I take over your Twitter account for a week because we know that you're going to get harassed about something, and I document any threats or anything like that? We know that women are subject to much more harassment and much more abuse than their male counterparts are. We know that. It's more than policy. It's about changing hearts and minds, and we really need to figure out a way that we're going to make this world, this place, a place where all voices are welcome. And we need to figure out a way that we can disagree, but not take somebody down as a result of it. It just makes our world that much less rich and fulfilling, because we're not hearing from everybody and we don't know how everybody is reacting to things. And it's always good to know how somebody else perceives things. So yes, big threat.
Returning again to data gathered by Statistics Canada, we learned that nearly 20% of women and nearly 15% of men experienced online harassment, and women are more likely to know who the perpetrator is, which leads to the conclusion that the nature of behavior directed at women is different from that directed at men. And while a higher number of women than men know who their perpetrators are, most online harassment is carried out by perpetrators who are strangers to the target of the harassment.
The social media companies who run these platforms, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Telegram, TikTok now, they just seem to grow every couple of years. They do very little to stop this. There's a reporting mechanism to say, oh, I've been targeted by this person or these people or this page. And they may actually do something in the short term. They may take a comment down, or they may remove a page or suspend somebody. But they're very quickly back in action. I mean, it very much is the Wild West. There's very little opportunity to protect people from it. And that boils down to a lot of the business model of social media companies, which depends entirely on engagement. And vitriolic comments tend to draw more attention, which means ultimately the more eyes they get, the more they can make from advertising.
In an effort to protect themselves from online harassment, nearly 30% of women and just shy of 20% of men have blocked other people's or deleted their own accounts. Although it appears that experiences of online harassment are relatively similar for women and men, there are specific and gendered motives for the harassment. For instance, the most commonly experienced behaviors by both women and men are being sent messages or images that were sexually explicit or suggestive, or being sent emails or messages that were threatening or aggressive. Although men did not experience these behaviors as frequently as women, it was men's sexual orientation, being bisexual or gay, that was the most significant risk factor in their being harassed online. Regardless of the gender or perceived gender of the target, being younger, Indigenous, gender or sexually diverse, disabled or not married, single, separated, or divorced, increased the likelihood of experiencing online violence.
As a white male journalist working for a large media company, I get a lot. But if you're a woman, you're going to get more. If you're a person of color, you're going to get more. If you check all the boxes and you're a woman, and a person of color. And then if you want to add one more extra box, you're a broadcast journalist, so you're more identifiable than those of us who work in print, you're going to get it leagues worse. And it'll escalate from, making fun of you or making fun of your appearance to just really outright awful misogynistic or outright sexist harassment. The way it sometimes takes with men, though, is where the women will get something that's overtly sexist. And I'm sure you're familiar with the kinds of comments that women would get in any walk of life, let alone journalists. For men, it sometimes reaches a point where they try to demasculate you in some fashion. So there's an obsession with your personal life, particularly in trying to suggest that you might be gay, as if somehow that would make you less of a man if you were, or anything that they think that they can do to try and denigrate you in public. So it's not just by email, it's often done in public on social media.
I just mentioned that I felt the sexualized stuff, the homophobic stuff, is probably not as common as really some of the other stuff. I suspect for a female is completely the opposite. That stuff is predominant. It's there all the time. There's people using gender to kind of demean the person all the time. And it'll be far more predominant there. I think kind of the thought pattern of probably someone who has toxic, masculinity is that you take someone, you ascribe them a non-traditional sexual role to kind of demean them down. So now you can apply kind of a gender violence lens on them.
This whole, you put yourself in the public eye, you had to know what you were getting into. Oh, yeah, okay, I thought we were going to discuss political issues. That's what I thought I was getting into.
Yes.
Right? I thought you'd be unhappy about, every other week garbage collection. Like this is not where you're going with this.
Yes, I thought this strain on the family was going to just be about time management, right? Really.
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
I'm not going to be
at home
as much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And the house is going to be a mess.
Yeah.
And, luckily my husband does the fair share of the housework, but there's a burden there as well. And I thought this was going to be the issue. Like I was going to be very busy and I was going to have to manage that. And I did not expect the impact that all of this would have on my husband and my 2 kids. And there's been an impact.
The Women's Media Center describes online abuse as a diversity of tactics and malicious behaviors ranging from sharing embarrassing or cruel content about a person to impersonation, doxing, stalking, and electronic surveillance to the non-consensual use of photography and violent threats. The online harassment of women, sometimes called cybersexism or cybermisogyny, is specifically gendered abuse targeted at women and girls online. It incorporates sexism, racism, religious prejudice, homophobia, and transphobia. We share this image from Women's Media Center, which can also be found in your guide for journalists, to depict tactics, legal issues, impacts, and the range and seriousness of online violence. It is imperative to point out that online abuse does not happen only to those with a public profile, and it is equally necessary to consider how it is covered by media and often carried out on the social media channels, by way of comments generally, of media outlets.
I absolutely think that that a lack of diversity and a lack of voices is a threat to our democracy. I think that the more harassment and the more intimidation female politicians and also female journalists take, it will shrink the pool of voices that we hear from. What's in it for me? If I'm going to put myself out there, what's in it for me other than abuse and intimidation? And if that's all there is, and I don't feel like it's too scary to go out there and try to make an impact, then I get silenced. And who else is getting silenced? And these are the voices that we need to hear from. Otherwise, we're only hearing from the people that don't get touched in terms of bullying and harassment. And they don't get touched. Why? Because everybody agrees with them. I believe that it is incumbent on all of us to take more time, to do more research, to find out who the people are in our community that have opinions to express, and provide them with a platform in which to do that. When it comes to how to make them feel safe, I think the more voices that we hear from, the more diverse voices that we hear from, I think will be empowering for other people. And I think that that will provide a community that will support as opposed to tear down. I think that it's very dangerous. The territory we're in right now is very dangerous because we're shrinking that pool. And I believe that we expand that pool by, we need to do more work. We need to make sure we're handing off the microphone to somebody else and ensuring that those voices get heard. What we can see, we can be, right? If we can see through a diverse lens and we can see that there's people that are representing diverse communities, then perhaps we feel empowered to do that ourselves. And the more that happens, the more it happens, the more it happens, the more it happens, right? Right now, we see, a lot of white men. We see some white women. We see very few BIPOC. The more that we can draw from diverse communities and the more we can put them on a platform and in front of a microphone and using their voice and however they're going to use the voice and support that, the more that we're going to hear and the safer it becomes. And there's a larger community looking out for people then, right? We expand our community. We don't shrink it. We expand it. And we expand our knowledge of the people that we know that are living in our community and the experiences that they have in our community. And therefore, we're better able and more equipped to support them and try to keep them safe. We need to find a way to support the people that go forward and put themselves out there and to help them feel safe. How easy is it for us to support the people that are putting themselves out there if all it takes is a coffee now and again? You want to tell me what's going on. Maybe there's something I can do, but maybe it's just about listening. Maybe what it is for us to listen and believe the things that people are going through, and then maybe that person who's listening is able to tell other people, and all of a sudden we've developed this community that supports the voices that we want representing us.
Key takeaways. Violence enacted and experienced online is real and takes a real toll on one's physical and mental health and well-being. Violence enacted and experienced online must be taken seriously, most especially because it can escalate.